Well, today we got some cool show and tell. I have a beautiful, beautiful knife here. You know it. It is the Annex. First time I saw this knife was at Blade Show. Mike, who you guys know him as Gavco here on YouTube, he bought one of these things and was showing it off, and I remember thinking how cool it was. And I wanted one, couldn't get one then, but I have one now. Due to a very special friend who made a promise a long time ago and kept his promise. Very honorable person, a really cool knife-aholic, we could say. This guy can really appreciate his knives, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Right now, like I said, he's going to be anonymous, but in the future, I'll probably tell you who it is. But anyway, it's funny because a lot of you guys know who he is without knowing who he is. But anyway, really special guy, and he hooked me up. And I want to show this knife off, talk a little about it. But it kind of brought up this discussion I wanted to have on these high-end knives. So first, let's take a look at it. Here's the packaging, very cool. All right, you got a little magnetic box. Got the dagger there. Cool padded case. A little certificate of authenticity. All right, take a look at this case. Very cool. With the embroidered signature. This is a Velcro patch, but it's made out of metal. Assuming some leftover titanium. Very, very cool. And that's not enough. The zipper pull is also the dagger. Anyway, let's get into it. Many versions of this knife. This one is the Stonewash DLC coated version. See, it's all blacked out. Super awesome. Love that pocket clip there too. You might notice that this is nice, solid piece of titanium. Okay, and then the lock bar is inserted afterwards with their proprietary screws, of course, so I can't take it apart. At least not unless I buy their bits. Just amazing. It's hard to really describe this. You just have to get one in hand. Beautiful design to begin with, but just perfectly executed. And the thing is a scalpel. Just beautiful. I love it. Super, super cozy too. I mean, it's ridiculously comfortable. And it comes with that awesome lanyard, which looks good on the knife, I think, but I wouldn't carry it. In fact, I EDC'd this knife today. I'll tell you about that in a second. But here's that very unique lanyard. All right, here it is on the knife. Just screws right in. Pretty unique. Very much different. Not everyone's cup of tea though, so it's cool that it does unscrew if you don't want it. Let's take that off, okay. But phenomenal knife. I mean, just real attention to detail here. Perfect lockup, obviously. Perfectly executed design. Super comfortable and certainly badass. But anyway, how much is this knife? What would you say this knife's worth? Of course, there's people watching this video who know exactly what this knife's worth, but if you had to guess, what would you say? 400 bucks, 500 bucks, 700 bucks? Well, you'd be getting close. On the low end, depending on what version you get of this knife, about 800, 850 bucks. These go all the way up to 1,700 bucks. This particular design is about $1,000. $1,000 for one knife. So that is our topic to talk about today. Are these high-end expensive folders? Who's buying them? Why are they buying them? A lot of people think it's ridiculous. A lot of people watching this video would never spend $1,000 on a knife. They would never spend more than 100 bucks on a knife. Does that mean they like knives less than the guy who's dropping 10 grand at a knife convention? I don't think so. I don't think how many knives you have in your collection or how expensive they are relates at all to how much you enjoy the hobby of collecting and using knives. You know, I know 13-year-old kids that watch my videos, that send messages and stuff, they are completely in love with cutlery. And some of those kids have, you know, one $20 knife. Some of them have, you know, 5 knives that total like 60 bucks in value. On the other side of the coin, you know, I know adults who are well off, who have a good amount of money, good paying jobs and stuff, and they have $50,000 worth of knives in their collection, and they just kind of like knives. It's not even their only hobby or only passion. I know one in particular person, I'm not going to name him, of course, but he's very well off. And he has over $100,000 in knives, easily. Easily. Okay, I'm talking about someone when he buys knives online, he makes orders of, you know, $2,000, $3,000 at a time. Been doing this for years. I know he loves motorsports. He has a fancy car. He has a muscle car. He has a boat. You know, knives aren't his only hobby. I know that there's 10-year-old boys that love knives more than he does, you know? So how much you have invested in your collection doesn't relate to how much you enjoy knives or the hobby of collecting and using knives. But the question is, who's buying these things? They must be rich people, right? Wrong. Of course, there's a couple of rich people that spend money on knives. But if you go to these conventions, you go to the swap meets, you go to things like Blade Show. Great example is Blade Show. You know what you're going to find at Blade Show? You're going to find maybe a handful of guys in suits, right? Maybe working booths or, you know, representing some companies. Maybe a couple of businessmen that are placing some big orders on knives. But the vast majority of people walking around are people just like me and you. Anyone from 13 years old to 30 years old, usually. Of course, there's some older guys too. Most of the time, they're into gear in general. You'll see a lot of Max Position bags and, you know, cool boots and tactical pants and all that kind of stuff. But they're not rich people. They're average people. So how can an average guy spend $1,000 on a knife? It's called sacrifice. That's all it is. It's very simple. Either you work harder or you get rid of the stuff that you don't care about as much, you know? Let's say Joe Schmo, married, kids, you know, he's never gonna have $1,000 left over in his paycheck. He's got bills and responsibilities. How can he ever obtain this $1,000 knife? Well, if he really wanted it, maybe he'll sell his motorcycle he doesn't drive that often, you know, or his baseball card collection, you know, trade one hobby for another. That's how people buy these things. You know, it's amazing, you know, what you can accomplish when you really are dead set on a goal. And that's kind of my point in this discussion, is that the guys and gals, and there are women for sure out there buying these knives too, the people dropping $1,000 on a single knife aren't necessarily rich. And I think that's awesome, because that just shows their commitment to getting one of these knives, you know? But I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want you to tell me, you know, briefly, because obviously you can't give a whole story in your, you know, the comment section, but I want you to write how old you are and what your most expensive knife is. Because I think a lot of people will be very surprised to see that some of the, you know, late teens and early 20-somethings do have $500 knives, $700 knives, $1,000 knives, you know? And on the other side of the situation here, again, you got 40, 50-year-old dudes who, you know, have a couple $100, you know, worth of knives collectively, but they love the hobby just as much as the teenagers and the 20-somethings, you know? So it's really cool how the knife community in general, it's so vast. There's such a diversity here. People who buy $5 knives, people who buy $1,000 knives, people who buy tactical knives versus people who buy traditional slip joints, people who buy fixed blades, you know, who hate folders, and the other side, people who love folders and hate fixed blades, you know, old and young, big and small, of every background, every race, every ethnicity. It's amazing to me. I think it's cool. It's very cool, the diversity we have in our knife community. Anyway, I just wanted to show off the knife a little bit, because I do think it's beautiful. I did EDC it today, and I was holding it. About every 5 minutes I reached down to make sure it's still in my pocket. I'm not used to carrying $1,000 knife. I've carried many $100 knives, many $200 knives, or even $300 knives, and a handful of like $500 or $600 knives, but I've never EDC'd a $1,000 knife, so I was a little nervous. I never lost a knife, knock on wood, but I certainly wouldn't want to start with this thing in my pocket. But it's beautiful, and it works very, very well. So again, if you want to participate in the comments, I'd love to know how old you are, what your most expensive knife in your collection is, and more importantly, what's the most amount of money you think you would ever spend on one knife? Doesn't matter what it is. If you have a dream knife, of course, you can let me know too. But I think people will be pretty surprised, you know? There's obviously stereotypes. People think, not everyone, but some people feel like, okay, the guys who are going to knife shows and spending $1,000 on one knife, they must be in their 50s, have a great job, or who knows, maybe they're retired and they have a bunch of money in the bank, and that's the only people that can afford $1,000 knives. And if that's what you think, you'd be very wrong. You know, there's a lot of youth that are spending big bucks on stuff like this because they're just into the hobby. It's what everyone's talking about, and they want to experience these different knives. And oftentimes, if you drop $1,000 on a knife, a lot of these people don't keep these knives very long. They'll love it, they'll look at it, they'll take pictures, they'll use it a little bit maybe, sometimes they don't, and they'll trade it for another $1,000 knife so they can experience a bunch of different $1,000 knives. You know, think about it. If you spend $1,000 on one knife like this, you get to experience it for a little bit. Maybe you lose a little bit of money if you use it. You sell for like $800, you know, trade for something else. You can experience a lot of different knives if you really work it, you know, and you work the trading on the forums and stuff like that, and you go to swap meets and, you know, you talk to a lot of people. You don't necessarily have to buy a $1,000 knife every month to experience a bunch of different expensive knives, you know. But anyway, I just thought it was a good little topic to discuss. So I'd love to hear your opinions. I'd love to hear, again, how old you are and what you'd be willing to spend on a knife. All right, so now that I put that question out there, I will answer it. I'll be the first person to answer the question. I am 30 years old. The most expensive knife in my collection right now happens to be this one. I didn't buy it. I can't afford to buy this particular knife right at the moment. This was a gift from an awesome friend. I would say that the most I would ever drop on a single knife would probably be about $1,500 if I had it. If I had $1,500, that's the most I would spend on a single knife. It would have to be a pretty damn special knife. All that being said, the most expensive knife I actually ever bought was a McHenry & Williams. And it was actually a replacement. I'll tell you the story real quick. Way back when, I sold pretty much my entire Zippo collection. Or excuse me, not sold it. I traded it for McHenry & Williams. I think it was a B07. Beautiful knife. I think I did a video on it too in the past. Loved the knife. Then I got into guns. I ended up trading that knife for a Smith & Wesson 686 with beautiful Cocobolo handles or grips. I later sold that gun, took some of that money, rebought that knife, the exact same knife, and then eventually traded that knife for a whole bunch of different cheaper knives. So, I've been there, done that. That's the most I ever dropped on a knife. But like I said, if I had the money and it was just something I just had to have, $1,500 is probably my max. I would never spend more than that. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. So anyway, with that, I want to thank you for watching the video, of course, spending some time with me, talking knives, and I hope you guys have a great day. And I'll see you soon. Take care.